Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back and thank you for being here. Today is part 4 or 5. I've really lost count. I don't really know anymore. Anyways, today is a big one I get a lot of questions on: my hand sanding, specifically satin finishes. So yeah, let's just do it. So, full disclosure, before I start any of this, a lot of my information that you're gonna hear here came from Nick Wheeler's YouTube videos. That's where I learned to hand sand. I think the video is called Hand Sanding 101. I recommend, highly recommend watching his videos. That is where I learned to hand sand. So pretty much all credit goes to him, because without him, my lines would probably be shit. So shout out to Nick Wheeler. I will actually link that video below. Like I said, I think it's called Hand Sanding 101. But anyways. Alright, so if you're looking to do clean hand sand satin finishes on your knives, there's a couple things that you need to know. Number one, and my biggest recommendation, would be coming off your machines clean. Clean grinds, clean lines, no deep grit marks that you think you're gonna get out through hand sanding, because you're not. It's important that you come off of your either belt sander or disc sander with even grit lines. So number one, come off your machine with clean lines. Number two, get yourself some good sandpaper. I use Rhino Wet by Indasa. The stuff is, I don't want to say it's engineered for knife makers, but it feels like it is. It's super wear resistant, works very well, especially if you're using carbon steel. Rhino Wet lasts, far longer than the stuff you're going to be buying at your hardware store, unless it's Rhino Wet, in which case, yeah, grab it. The next thing is you're going to want some comfortable hand sanding sticks. I actually used to use just like a small piece of maple and would hold it with like my 2 fingers, which was stupid. But get yourself some good comfortable hand sanding sticks. This is the one I use. It's just a piece of some sort of steel. I don't even know what it is. I just had it laying around, so I decided to use it. I also have a really big piece of G10. Something that you can get a good grip on. This one I like because it has the pads and my hands can wrap around that nice and tight. And then for finishing, again, these came from Nick Wheeler's videos. These are like, I think he calls them paddled hand sanding sticks, and I have a piece of leather on the back of there. That's for my finishing. And I mean, I've tried a ton of stuff. Like, I have a ton of hand sanding sticks. So just find what works best for you, something comfortable, and sort of go with that. Alright, and I think that's pretty much it before I get into the actual physical hand sanding. The most important thing is doing good machine work to set yourself up for easy hand sanding, because if you can do that, you'll be able to hand sand your blades in record time, hopefully. So I'm just gonna jump right into this. I'll start hand sanding on this blade, and yeah, I guess I'll just walk you through it from there. Alright, so this is my hand sanding setup. Nothing crazy, it's literally just a piece of wood. I see people with jigs and vices and stuff like that. I'd love to have one of those, but this does it for now. Just get yourself something so that you're set up comfortably. This is gonna stop my hand from shoving into this edge, because right now, I mean, this is probably at about 2/1000 of an inch thick. So if I jam my hand into that, it'll be a nice fun trip to the hospital. I'm gonna shim this because I have a tapered tang, and I don't, when I clamp this down, I don't want the tip stabbing me. Make sure the knife is nice and secure, it's not gonna go anywhere. Usually I have lighting set up, but I think it's gonna screw with the camera, so. So I came off my disc sander at 400 grit, and that's where I'm gonna start. I know some people like to go back down to probably 220 and then level this out, sort of make sure everything's nice and flat, and then work their way back up. But I've done this so many times, I'm quite confident that I've come off my grinder with flat surfaces, flat convex, flat this way, convex this way. So I doubt there will be any high or low spots. So I'm gonna jump right into 400 grit, because that's what I have. Now, all my grind lines are going this way, so I want to get everything nice and uniform, and how I'm going to do that is I'm not going to go straight back and forth, because 400 is not going to be my finish. 600 or 800 is going to be my finish. What I want to do is go in on an angle and make all those lines go in one direction, so that I know I've switched all these grind lines, and I know that that entire blade is at that grit, which will be 400. So all I'm gonna do, wrap my sanding stick and going on an angle and start to change those grind lines until everything is nice and uniform. Switch the camera angle so you can see. Now you can use some sort of lubrication like WD-40, Windex, soapy water, whatever you like. It's just my preference to not use that. It ends up getting a bit messy, and I don't know, over time I've just decided not to use any sort of lubrication. That's just my preference. So you'll see how quickly this changes direction from 400 grit to 400 grit this way. And once you feel your sandpaper basically not cutting anymore, throw it out. I mean, there's no point in wasting time. When it comes down to it, sandpaper is super cheap compared to your time it takes to make a knife. So that was 2 pieces of sandpaper. I'm going to show you how quickly it took me. I mean, I'm not done. There's still some deeper scratches in there and I have to go over it, but that's how fast it can be. Alright, so I'm gonna get my light set up. Having good lighting is really important to be able to see you're getting all those scratches out. And I'm gonna go at this for a minute and then I'll come back to you when it's ready. Okay, so here we are. This is obviously the second side. I just quickly breezed through both sides. This is 400 grit done. You can see kind of the angle I'm hand sanding that on. I got all my machine scratches out of there. Everything's going the same direction. It's important that you really check under lots of light outside. Just make sure that you've got all those scratches out. That way you know you're ready to move up. Because once you move up, if you see another deep scratch, again, it's going to be really difficult to get it out with higher grits. It's just going to be really just a waste of time. So it's important that you get everything out. Now, if I was going up 2 more grits, what I would do is, so everything's currently going this way. My next grit, I would start going like that. And it'll give me a better visual representation of what's going on with my scratch pattern. But since I'm not, so this is at 400, I'm gonna stop at 600. I'm gonna go this way, because that's how I want the finish of my blade to be. That's how I want the finished grind lines to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and tackle that. And then I will talk about how I put my final satin finish on. And that comes after I've fully fit up my handle. Alright, so that's about it there. I got all my 400 grit marks out. And this is at 600 grit, which is going to be my final. It's really dirty right now, lots of wayward lines and J-hooks and stuff like that. If I catch this in the right light, you can see those J-hooks. And what I mean by J-hooks is, there's some right here. J-hooks are just stop and start points. So when I was sanding, I would come here, stop, turn back the other way, stop, turn back the other way, and it creates these what are called J-hooks. So how do I get rid of those J-hooks and put a clean satin finish on my knife? The first thing I'm doing is I'm just going to get a piece of sandpaper, same size that I had been using the entire time, except instead of this time working like that, I'm going to start to get everything going the full length of the blade, as smooth as I can. And that's going to help get rid of the majority of the J-hooks, 1. And 2, this is also a good time to actually see if you've gotten all those scratches out, because it's going to have cleaned up most of the blade and make it a tiny bit easier to see if you got that previous grit scratches out. Once I've done that, I'm going to take, this is my finishing sanding stick. So it's got a beveled edge. I put a beveled edge on that, so when I wrap the sandpaper around, I can see where it's tucked around the front. And I've got a really thin piece of, I think this is just like some cheap leather. But the important thing is, it's the surface area that it's covering is wider than my blade. So I've got plenty of room on both sides of it. Now, for my final strokes and final cleanup, and I wouldn't do this until after I've fit up my handle, because the front of the handle and the wood, and if you're using G10, can really scratch up the front of the blade here. So right now this would be perfect, and I would just go into starting the handle, and then once I'm done with the handle, I come back and put my final satin finish on here. Obviously after I've done my touch mark as well. But just for the sake of showing you guys, I'll take my sandpaper, make sure I get a cut that is slightly larger than the width of my blade. I'll wrap it around the front, nice and tight, and I can see what's going on there. I'll start behind where the handle is going to finish and slowly start to pull those lines. Basically keeping my elbows locked and rocking backwards, trying to make those lines as straight all the way down as I can. If you want to use Windex or lubrication or something like that, you can do so. Again, I just choose not to. Only do a couple passes, because then that sandpaper doesn't start to cut as well anymore. Switch it up. And again, as I'm pulling, I'm trying to hit. This is where that leather comes into play, because it's a tiny bit bigger and it's got some give. I'm trying to hit the entire blade all at once to get all those scratches coming down. Now, I'll see a lot of other knife makers that like to line up their satin finish with the handle. So what I mean by that is they're coming sort of following the line of the shape of the handle, which is pointing down, and they'll pull their grit sort of this way. Whereas for me, for whatever reason, I like it when my lines follow my edge. So that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult, because it's not really moving in the way that the knife is moving. And what I mean by that is the tip, like it's not following the line of the tip, which would be easier. It might be easier to come like this instead of coming like this. But I like my lines to follow my edge, and that's just personal preference. So again, I'm starting behind here, and I'm sort of You can't really tell, but I'm slightly lifting up this edge so that I don't get caught on my choil or anything. It just makes it a tiny bit easier. And it does take a lot of practice. It does. I mean, hours and hours and hours of trying to get all these little scratches out, trying to get everything flowing in the same direction. Another thing is, move past the tip. I know that sounds stupid, but you'll find there's a tendency to sort of lift up and flick off the tip, and that can cause some weird like patterns and scratch lines up here. So make sure that you're supported well under there and just pull it right past the tip. And if you're afraid of that tip breaking, then shim something up behind the handle that angles the knife sort of downwards so that the tip is already touching, in my case, the piece of wood. So I'm not worried about messing anything up, breaking that tip. And that should get you there eventually. You can already see, I only took a few passes, but you can already see it's much cleaner than it was before. Obviously still some work needs to be done, but I mean, it looks way better than it did. Alright, so a few more things to note. Number one, no, I don't have any plunge lines or plunge cuts on that knife that I'm hand sanding. If you do, again, using something like this that has that edge, that bevel, and see how thin that is, or a sanding stick like this that again has that bevel, this one being much thinner. Something you can wrap a piece of sandpaper around really tight and be able to see those plunges when you're coming out of them. That's very important, very key to sanding some clean plunge lines. And secondly, if you find that you're getting caught up right here, because that is a sharp corner, you're getting caught up right there when you're trying to sand that whole blade, my suggestion to you would be mark up where your handle's going to be and pre-round that choil. Number one, it already makes it easier for when you're done doing the handle glue up. It'll make it easier to clean up and round that choil anyways. And two, you won't get hung up on that hard corner, or just knock that hard corner, that area down. And you shouldn't get hung up on there with your sandpaper when you're trying to put on that finish. Anyways, that's all I've got for hand sanding. That's how I do my hand sanded finishes. hopefully you found some of that helpful. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, leave them down below. And other than that, yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.